Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're glad broadcasting across all channels again.
We're back on Facebook.
Like a month. I know, right, man?
I'm no longer banned.
We can come to you in all the various platforms where you enjoy the Moonshine Jesus Show. So congratulations, Mark, on being liberated by Facebook once again.
Yeah, it was terrible, and I apologize for my horrific use of hate speech, which just seems to what have gotten me into this position.
Right, hate speech of like speaking truth about
right?
About hate group, calling out hate groups, right?
Yes,
heaven forbid we hold the KKK accountable for being a racist hate group.
You imagine that?
I know.
But anyway, we are back. And it's fun and it's exciting.
We have things to talk about today, and we are brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. And today we're talking about Blaze. And if you haven't seen this, it's an independent Australian film. There will be some spoilers, but I imagine many of you may not have seen it, and perhaps this will pique your interest. Hey, hope you will follow us on social media. I am here today, of course, with Mark. How are you doing today, Mark?
I am doing great, as always. There's been a few exceptions, but I'm really looking forward to digging in on this one with you, man. What a unique and maybe needed film this is.
Very unique, very unique. I've been waiting to hear your perspective on a lot of things. I'm excited to dig into it. But first, we got to get some drinks in us before we really can delve into this. You know, we need some thought juice here. So what are you drinking?
Well, an important symbol in the show is a dragon, and in particularly a white dragon. White dragon ends up, we can maybe talk about this depending on where the conversation goes, a symbol for the main character of death and rebirth kind of thing. So I'm having a white dragon, which is 1.75 ounces of tequila, 7.75 ounces of Cointreau, 0.75 of lemon juice, an egg white, and shaken hard until it gets this nice frothiness and gets this beautiful kind of white, it's almost silky looking drink. How about you, sir? What are you going with?
That looks a lot like the white dragon there. So I again with the dragon themed.
Seems like a natural place to go.
I know, right? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So, and in particular, the dragon's blood was also significant.
Yes.
So there's this point where there's blood spewing on Blaze from the dragon. So I'm drinking a dragon's blood, and really what it is red champagne. But you know, if you're going to drink dragon's blood, you know, you may as well drink it fancy. So
absolutely.
Here we go. Cheers to you, Mark.
Cheers, sir.
Is it good?
I don't know about you, but I can have two of those, I think.
Oh, let's see if we can get to it. Okay, see if you can chug this one during the break, and we'll come back, see if Mark's on his second one.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our Geek Out segment. We're going to take just a little bit of time and kind of set the movie up, talk about what excited us, and maybe even tip our hat and hint at the next segment of Theopolitico when we look at the movie a little more in depth from theological political perspectives. So for those who haven't seen it or maybe not even heard of it, which wouldn't be really completely surprising, Blaze is a movie from 2022. It was a Tribeca nominated film. And it is a sort of brilliantly and necessarily discomforting fantasy horror coming of age story about one 12-year-old girl's journey of using her imagination to sort of navigate her trauma after witnessing a really just horrific rape and murder. And it is done in some very visual and graphic ways and creative ways of getting into her imagination. I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit more about that. But my first question, Caleb, is just going to be a little bit serious. And maybe again hint at what we might end up talking about in the next segment. In the U.S., we heard in the movie, this was an Australian-based movie, we heard the statistics there. In the U.S., 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men are victims of domestic violence. And intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime. Those numbers in mind, how important is this film?
Yeah, it's extremely important, and so I think one scene in the film that points to that is whenever Blaze, the little girl, is talking to her psychiatrist and trying to grapple with how someone who had once been in a relationship with someone else could hurt them. And the psychiatrist reflects those statistics, the Australian version of those statistics, to her, saying that most of these kinds of crimes happen with people who you know. And I think breaking the silence on that is so important because it's something that often doesn't get talked about. And so when Blaze breaks the silence on what she's seen with her friend, and they're talking about that, her friend reveals that the same thing has happened in her family. And so I think a lot of times we keep the silence on this, and it is swept under the rug.
And maybe one of the most heartbreaking parts the whole thing's heartbreaking, but her friend, she speaks about an uncle who is still allowed to come to family visitations and gatherings, and she does it so matter-of-factly. There's almost no emotion left around it. And the fact, there's a real commentary going on there that we can talk about, but it was kind of heartbreaking for that. But I did like the fact that they were willing to take this head on. I'm curious, though, within the first, I think, 7 minutes of the film, that the filmmaker, who is the first-time filmmaker, she's actually an award-winning artist, but this was her first film. She actually made the film because she was listening to basically NPR in Australia and heard the statistic about intimate partner abuse, and something just went off in her head. She said, "This is my new thing. I'm going to raise awareness about this." I'm curious as to what you thought. Within the first 7 minutes, we actually see our main character witness this traumatic event where there is a force of this man forcing himself on a woman, and it ends up becoming very violent, and he rapes her, and he ends up completely killing her, and it's graphic and difficult to watch. My question, I'm curious, from a filmmaking point of view, do you think it was necessary to show what was shown?
I think that one of the powerful things about that was that we really got to witness things from this 12-year-old girl's point of view. And so in this first 7, 8 minutes of the movie, there's not really any dialogue either. So Blaze hasn't spoken. The main character hasn't spoken at all. She's listening to her music. She's out. She's collecting cicada shells, and she's going and being a kid. She's a kid going about her everyday life, right? And she's going to the store. She's getting a popsicle, and it's in the midst of this that she witnesses this assault that we then see. And so I think the power of doing that is that we get to see it from her eyes. And something I think there's more meat to talk about is that we kind of get to see her childhood disappear from her in that scene as she's standing there. And Very
I was
powerful,
going to say,
very powerful.
yeah, in that scene, and you already pointed out some of the things, like there is so much metaphor that goes on and symbolism that goes on in this movie. You can tell an artist made it. I couldn't really keep up with all of the imagery and metaphor that was going on, but you just named two that were these kind of beautiful foreshadowings of what was about to happen in terms of the cicada shell, where the cicada is leaving its young life, and that's the remaining evidence of its young protective shell, that now it's going, it's off and living out its adult life. And then the beautiful symbol of childhood. Who doesn't like a chocolate covered vanilla ice cream cone, pop? And she's holding that. She gets that on as she walks up to the crime happening. And as it happens, her hand slowly crushes that ice cream, and you see the chocolate and the vanilla starting to come out of the hand, and that part, that symbolism of almost what we've all had in childhood, and it's hard to have that and not reconnect with your childhood, and to see her crushing that in the midst of it going on while she's wearing that cicada. I mean, there were so many levels of artistry trying to help us be ushered through this difficult journey. I mean, I think it was very necessary. There's been a lot of complaints. I just, out of curiosity, looked it up. There were certain people at Tribeca in particular who didn't think it was necessary to show, and I feel the exact opposite. I think it was very necessary, because that's what we do too much in life, is try to push it to the side and act like it didn't really happen. It's just something people talk about. But I also thought our experiencing it and walking through it was difficult. And then to put that back in, that I'm just sitting here watching a movie.
Right.
That helps you understand the trauma that Blaze is going to be carrying with her from that point on. I think it did a beautiful job at that. But let's talk a little bit about her character. Oh, go ahead.
I completely agree, and I think another piece that added to that made it so powerful was also the cinematography in the midst of it. And so, like, as the woman Hannah is being assaulted, she's looking up, right, and then it cuts to Blaze with in the exact same position, with her eyes looking up. I mean, it's symbolizing these two being tied together in a really powerful way through this moment. In fact, it's almost as if it's happening to Blaze at the same time, because it's impacting her life so much. And so it wasn't just, I think, that we saw an assault. I think it was also the way that they tied it together that really helped us to understand how impactful it was going to be on the character.
Yeah, it was also
really great directing.
Really amazing directing, the storytelling, because she co-wrote it with someone, and I don't remember right now who. But even in these little moments that speak to volumes, like when it's going on, we learn that the woman who is raped and killed, her name is Hannah, and as Hannah is all of this horrific stuff is happening to her, she notices Blaze step out. They make a brief eye contact. And from that moment on, even though Hannah knows that her life is at risk, she starts taking actions to protect Blaze. Like, and it's not even having to process. It's like that it was understood that they are in this together, and that she's going to protect Blaze in any way she can, to the point of not quite running off, so that the guy kind of keeps following her and away from Blaze. And it was kind of just so many moments like that where there's this big picture story going on, but they also give these very important little social cues of what reality is like, in terms of her willingness to sacrifice herself to protect another woman, or a soon-to-be child who's growing into her womanhood. Just beautiful writing, and sad, recognizing how real and necessary that is.
Yeah. And the fact that we don't hear from Blaze during any of that she's silent. And even we see the next few scenes as they unroll, and her dad's finding out what's going on. She's at the hospital and the police station. She still doesn't speak until the next morning when Dad's fixing breakfast. And did you notice, Mark, what the first words that she said were? She said two words Uh, and her first words whenever she finally spoke.
I don't remember at all. I'm interested.
Because I thought this was one of the moments that stood out to me. Her dad asked her if she wants. I don't even remember what he asked. If she wants something and something, she said no, no. And so I thought it was really powerful that this movie that's a kind of about consent and assault and all this, that the main character, the first two things she says are no, and then he asks another question, no, like asserting that power. I thought that was a powerful choice in terms of dialogue for her not to speak for so long, then to say no. No,
absolutely, and then we pretty quickly get thrown into the trauma of when she really starts talking, when she is at the courtroom and is basically being asked what happened, and immediately the man who committed the crime, his lawyer starts going after her, which in a lot of ways makes you understand like the silence for so long. There's kind of a commentary of not breaking the silence, but the moment that you break the silence, there was this immediate making her the guilty, almost like constantly asking questions that doubted her and were not believing the person who experienced part of what happened. And I think that was such a strong victim blaming, exactly. And then that white dragon that we talked about, and we can talk a lot more about the dragon. She has this beautiful dragon in her bedroom that she has created out of her mind, who is this kind of mother, protector, nurturer, but also not really any gender at all. But it does have that very nurturing sense about it, and strength behind it as well. That she goes to, and she takes a little white version of it to the court, and she imagines, as they're coming after her, and she's getting upset that this is all of a sudden becoming about her and not about this horrible man right over there in the corner who did this terrible thing. And she imagines that dragon coming up in her mouth, from the inside of her up to her mouth, and blazing a flame, right at him, taking him out. Like this anger is being like channeled and directly towards the person who we really should be going after.
Yeah. They did such a great job of pulling in that dragon, because whenever we started talking about this, it's described as kind of a girl and her dragon trying to find justice, and so seeing how that dragon is in her mind as she's trying to make sense of the world around her and trying to deal with some of her own issues, and to find the strength to confront, a full-grown man, who she shouldn't ever have to deal with, but trying to have to take on the world as people are blaming her, is really powerful. And that's was a very interesting way to help us understand her perspective, and how like these elements of childhood are there, but also as she's going into adulthood and trying to make sense of the world in a way that she never should have had to do. Wonderful filmmaking, and it's really a powerful story.
Absolutely. And we've just barely begun to crack all of the parts we could be talking about in this segment. But, I think it's ultimately just say this is a very important film. I really hope people will be willing to watch it. It is difficult to watch, but it's so creative and imaginative and has so many important things to say. And I suspect in our next segment, while we may not get into the symbolism as much, or maybe some, because it is important, there's a lot more for us to talk about and kind of wrestle with that this movie is trying to talk to us about. So let's take a quick drop and come back on the other side to our theopolitical segment.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're talking about theology and politics of the movie Blaze. So there's all kinds of socio-political things we can talk about, but before we go into that, I do want to talk just a little tiny bit about some of the symbolism before we move away, as in
Sure.
particular the dragon, because
Mm.
the dragon is this looming figure for Blaze and is such an important figure in the film. And so I'm curious, Mark, to get your perspective on exactly what the dragon represents. What is the dragon for Blaze, and what does it mean when the dragon dies?
Well, I think that the dragon represents the sanctuary of her childhood, essentially. The safety and sanctuary of her childhood, the deep recesses of her imagination, the place that she can go to and find herself protected and process and try to understand who she is, even as she's maturing into womanhood. Um, and so you get protector, you get nurturer, but it for me ultimately it is, I think, a childhood sanctuary ultimately. And so the death of the dragon ends up being her moving into adulthood. But I found that, and I think personally, I think the movie wanted it to be, I found it sad that the world was teaching her that she had to kill her dragon in order to become an adult. For me, that childhood fantasy, the dragon is hard to describe. It was bright colors and it was everything that was imaginative and fun and engaging. And for me, there was a little bit of sadness of almost saying, isn't it too bad that we can't hold onto parts of that childhood or figure out how to use them in a way that goes into adulthood with us? Because it was a sanctuary. It did protect her. It did help her be safe. In her particular case, she used it too much and it became all defining. It defined who she was rather than part of who she was that was an important tool. And I just felt like that was part of what we missed. I felt like the show was really trying to, in some ways, say it's too bad that we can't figure out better balances and take those kinds of really wonderful parts of childhood with us into adulthood. Some people manage to, and it turns out that if you look at her art, the director who made this, I have to believe she managed to bring part of that with her into her adult life. I mean, what do you think about the dragon?
I was going to say, that sometimes people grow up and they still talk about comic book movies and stuff on weekly podcasts, and they find a way to. No, I don't know anyone like that.
Celebrate that childhood. Losers.
Trying to hold on
bunch
to
of
that
losers.
Yeah, so because the death of the dragon does happen around the time she gets her first period, and we get to see that, and she, in a powerfully symbolic moment, takes that blood and uses it kind of as war paint on her face, and then ultimately slays the dragon and kind of puts on the skin of the dragon as she becomes her own dragon. For herself. But another theme that's rolling through here is not only the theme of childhood, but also this theme of mental illness. Because whenever the dragon is dying, Blaze is institutionalized. And she is institutionalized largely because of her imaginative nature and the things that she is seeing. Is this also, Mark, a statement on psychopharmacology and what is lost whenever people are on medication, or the value is the director making a statement about medication and mental illness, or what's going on with that?
I think she's definitely making a statement about drugs and mental illness and the treatment of it. I honestly think it's a little heavy-handed of a statement. We have our main character, Blaze, asking, will the drugs kill my dragon? And we see her as she first starts taking the pills, laying lethargically, fully dressed in a shower with water falling on her and her just not doing anything compared to her kind of active life before that. She starts hiding the pills and she starts getting more active and more engaged again, but in a really unhealthy way. This kind of sinking deeper into her imagination. Not that that's bad, but does it so deeply that she's kind of denying the real world and letting it define that imaginary world, define who she is. So I think it comes out a little heavy handed. And I think that the movie does that a few times. So it's very heavy handed about its approach and certain things it's trying to communicate. I do think there is some value to saying that we too frequently leap to drugs and think that that's the solution. For me, this movie pointed to how important the balance is between the pharmaceuticals and understanding the person's life. And I would say even their inner life that helps them cope and gives them ways of dealing with difficult times. The dragon is a coping mechanism of sorts. And we do have that wonderful, beautiful scene where she finally talks to a psychiatrist that's not being performative like the first one that was assigned to her.
Yep.
And who really talks to her like a real person and ultimately says to her, your response to trauma will be with you for the rest of your life. You're not going to escape it. It's going to be there. Some days it won't be there at all. Some days it'll be a little. Some days it's just going to fall on you. But ultimately, you don't have to let that define you. And so I think between all of that, we get this wonderful balance of what it should be like. An open discussion with a trained psychiatrist who can help you, psychologist who can help you walk through the traumas and understand them and how to navigate them. Medicine that will keep it from getting from so immense and overcoming that you're not in a space where you can work with the psychologist and do that. So I think there's a balance that needs to be there. And in some ways, the movie, in my opinion, both argued for it, but also kind of heavy-handedly was judgmental of medicine. Do you think that's fair, or do you have a different?
I think it's fair. I think the point was also kind of lost because I think it was unclear as I think the dragon was primarily about childhood, and I thought it complicated things to also have the dragon be tied into mental illness. And so in some ways, I thought that took away from the point that they were trying to make about childhood in general. And so I think I would have preferred if there was a way to talk about those two things in a different way. I felt like it kind of muddied the waters a little bit to see the dragon linked with mental illness at all. Because in fact, it made me kind of wonder at the point as we're seeing her kind of come to terms, like, what was the dragon, mental illness, or was the dragon childhood? And I came down in the same spot you did, I think, but I felt like the waters were a little muddied by that. And I think you're certainly right that there was some ambivalence about what exactly we should do with medication and what exactly the right answer is. So one of the other things, Mark, that we saw run throughout this film is, I think, an idea of toxic masculinity. Not that that's a thing that we have to deal with or anything, right? But men consistently thinking that they have certain rights to women, or that we need to project this notion of manliness, and we see this throughout our society over and over again, right? From everything from like gun culture to confronting women's rights. And I'm curious, Mark, how do we go about confronting this toxic masculinity? Are there things that we can do to kind of subvert this and to help rid ourselves of this notion that men always need to be in control and that the patriarchy needs to be strengthened? How do we subvert that kind of norm in our society?
Wow, that's a giant question. I
know it is.
I can throw a few out, and there's obviously many more. I mean, part of it is about education. Part of it is about how we nurture our boys and the culture that we put them in growing up. Part of it is about nurturing women and empowering women and making sure that that the systems that are structured against them don't hamper them so much, to make sure that we have women in important positions where they help change those rules. So when we vote, if you've got two candidates, you're trying to decide the difference between, personally, pick the woman. They're going to be able to advocate more for the people who are marginalized. than particularly a middle-aged to older white man who's straight in particular, which is who we tend to put in those positions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, those are a couple of the things for me: education, looking at the environments that we raise boys in, empowering girls as we raise them, and making sure that the systems that are designed to reinforce this kind of misogynistic, male-dominated society, that those systems have enough women in them that we can begin changing. I mean, there are lots of others. What things are you thinking about?
I'm thinking primarily what the church can do and what we can kind of ways we can change our behavior as a church, because certainly there are things societally, but I think we, starting real close to home at ways that we talk about God, trying to get rid of just the masculine images of God. We focus so much on that in kind of Orthodox Christian churches, and we don't talk enough about feminine aspects of God, or even feminine aspects of Jesus like the mother hen and all of that. And I think that if churches become more comfortable embracing feminine aspects of God and talking about God in that way beyond, and then moving to beyond a gender binary in terms of talking about God, that I think that those are important things that we can begin to do to get rid of some of our inherited bad theology that the church has just given us. But I also think we see that in practical terms in thinking about who's involved in church leadership. I mean, Are we just putting straight cisgender white men in leadership in the church? Or are we trying to represent the diversity of what the church is supposed to look like, what the people of God are supposed to look like? And I think that if we're talking about a practical step in terms of churches, that whenever you're choosing leadership, choose leadership that's a little more diverse. Instead of that. I know. Wait, can that happen in churches? Can those kinds of discussions happen in churches, Mark? But won't people get mad and just leave if you start holding accountability there?
And the answer is yes. Some people will get mad and leave, but the response to that, and that's okay. If we're doing the right thing, if we're representing diversity, and that there's someone on their journey where that's not where they are and they can't quite understand it, it's okay if they need to find a place to have a different place for their spirituality as they continue on the path that they're on. Hopefully there'll be lots of people in their lives and out there that they keep bumping into that are educating them on why their particular way of seeing the necessary for white men or whatever to lead. Maybe there'll be education and they'll slowly change, but it's not our job to pull everybody along in the journey. Our job is to try to understand how to love everybody and to make the choices to reflect that, right?
So I guess you're saying that we shouldn't water down Jesus's teachings to appease straight cisgender white men. Huh. Well,
yeah,
that sounds pretty good, actually.
I wish I would have said it as eloquently as you did. But yes, that's exactly my
point. Speaking of how eloquent and smart I am, I'm ready to move into the next segment, Mark, to the Make Me Look Stupid segment, where I want to see if I'm eloquent and smart enough to try and make you look stupid today. So why don't we take a quick break and come back?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our final segment, a segment that we enjoy very much, a segment we call Make Me Look Stupid, where we ask questions of each other to see if we can stump our co-host. I'm just going to be straight up front here. I'm not trying to stump you. I want you to help me think through something here.
Okay, let's do it together, Mark.
That would be great. Could it? I don't think it was intended in the movie, but could you see the dragon representing God? The dragon is protector, is mother, is nurturer. At one point, the dragon is in her, so that's one way of understanding God, that God is in me. But then at some point, she recognizes she's part of God, not so much that God's in her. Could that be seen? And then you've got the imagery of the white dragon. It's across from ending one life and beginning a new life. Could there be anything helpful about seeing the dragon as a symbol for God, protector, mother, nurturer?
Well, that's really interesting, especially since Blaze says herself that that dragons turning white are symbolic of rebirth and renewal, which is certainly a central theme of a lot of different religious traditions, including Christianity. That there's this thought of renewal through God or through some kind of spirituality, and also a transforming nature of God, depending on where you are in life and the kind of concept of God you have to have on whether it's a God who's a silent protector in the corner, or a God who is kind of a part of you as you find empowerment to confront the world, which is ultimately what she has to do. So I'll admit I didn't think of the dragon in that way throughout the movie, but I kind of like it. Where do you land on it, Mark?
Well, I kept struggling with it. It was probably about halfway through the movie where I don't remember exactly what happened, but there was a moment where I went, this is almost some godlike imagery going on with the dragon. Zephyr is the name of the dragon. But here's where I struggle. I think there were a lot of parts that were very much has real clear overtones of God from a Christian perspective. I mean, even the white dragon, when there's a large white dragon and she's going to become part of the dragon and cuts it open, she's baptized by the blood of the dragon. I mean, there's just so much symbolism that could work. Here's my struggle: is it really is just a dragon of protection and nurture. To me, there's a part of it that reminds me of certain churches who that's all God is. And a lot of the prosperity gospel folks kind of just think of protector and nurturer always, but not inspiring you into doing better things in life and making the world better for other people, kind of stuff. So that's the place where it starts falling apart with me. It's like an incomplete image of God, but it just felt like there was so much imagery that tied back that I guess I'm still wrestling with, is that there? And if so, is it a good thing?
Although when she, to further your point, Mark, whenever she takes on the skin of the white dragon and dresses herself all in white to go out, she does then go out and be a protector of others. And so she goes to make her statement to the court to advocate for justice for the family whose mother was killed. And so, I mean, in a way, she kind of becomes that godlike action out in the world, which I think is what when Christianity's at its best, what we're really trying to do is to not depend solely on a dragon in a corner or an old guy in the sky or some concept of an abstract God that we have, but to try and make a real concrete difference in the world. So I don't know. I think you've convinced me.
Well, the great part is you may have convinced me. So.
Wait, no, Mark, no, you were really smart about this because you talked me through this into agreeing to your point. I think you made me look stupid by walking me through this and saying, "Wait, yes, Mark, yes, you're 100% right. I like that. I had no idea. I didn't think about that. You're right.
Crafty. I was crafty.
You are crafty. Okay." I have a two-part question, Mark, of things that and maybe this will make me look stupid too, because these are things that I didn't understand.
Oh, no, I didn't.
And I want to know.
There's a lot that I didn't. There was a lot in this movie that I could not figure out what was going on.
So I've got two things I didn't understand, a part A and a part B, and I need help understanding them. So
I feel like you're going to easily make me look stupid here. I really kind of feel like that's where we're going fast.
Yeah, no, you'll have explanations for these, I'm sure. So whenever she's in the bad psychiatrist's office, she grabs two kangaroos and envisions herself kind of with the kangaroos and between them, and they are kind of kissing. And then she gets them stuck together and breaks them, trying to get them apart. I'm curious what that's trying to say about those kangaroos, or what that visual image is from.
Well, here's
part two. Wait. And part two, I'm gonna spit it out because I'm gonna forget it, Mark.
Go ahead. Yeah,
okay, I'm gonna forget them both. Okay. So I also want to know the significance of the claymation coming to take the pills and all that. I need to know that too. Okay, so now you can have all you, Mark.
Well, I'm glad that you asked the first question first, because I have a relative answer for that, and maybe while I'm answering it, I might come up with something for the other one.
Good.
So for me, those two kangaroos kissing, she has all these figurines on sort of a display case in her room, and they're all two figurines. I believe that so what we haven't talked about, I don't even know, some people may not have picked up on it. Before she witnesses this horrific crime, as she's leaving her room, there is this indication that the dragon's already there. There is this interesting bright light and a little tinkling and some colorful lights that happen. And I believe that she was already dealing with some emotional, mental issues. And the dragon was already around. And I think a big part of that, because they always leave it a mystery, was the separation of her mom and dad. And I think that's her fantasy and her fixation with anything that comes in twos that seem to be a couple.
Yeah.
And with that particular small figurines that ultimately become very large, and they kiss each other almost very intimately with her underneath them. And it almost makes a heart and is almost like shelter in terms of the imagery that's there. I think of what's going on there is seeing her desire to have been raised in what she thinks of as an ideal, nurturing family that she doesn't have anymore. And I wonder if the dragon, in some ways, isn't the replacement for the second part of that two-person family that she might have been seeking out. So that's where I read that to be from, and what it was all about. As for that claymation little girl, she climbs out of not only her, but also she goes back to the site of the crime and imagines the body still laying there, but in sort of the creative style, but not colorful. And the little doll climbs out of it too. And the only thing that made sense to me was that it represented our inner selves, because that particularly when with Blaze, when it would crawl out, mostly what we saw it doing was taking the pill for her, almost like her inner self was dying because of this pill. So the best as I could say is that it represents some inner self. I don't have any great insight to what it meant coming out of the dead woman's body, and what she might be trying to say about the inner self of her. I was still grappling with it before I got there. So those are my takes. What did you see? I mean, were there anything in those that made any sense to you?
I like yours, Mark. That sounds great. That's fantastic.
There were so many images in this movie. Like, it was nonstop. And to even catch what half of them meant, I wish that the director at some point, and she's an artist, so she's never going to do this, would sit down and say, here's what I was thinking when I put these images in there. I mean, obviously, she put them in there for them. She's an incredible artist. She put them in there they were something important and emotional to her. She recognized it conveyed an emotion. She put it in there so we could see it and experience the emotions we needed to as we associated with it, I think.
I think you're right. And, I had a similar thought about the kangaroos and making sense. I saw it kind of as making sense of relationships. So she was kind of coming of age. And so she didn't necessarily have this model of two parents, the two parental relationship. And then she's seen this crime of a man and a woman interacting, and not an intimate way, but trying to figure out what all of that is as she is coming of age herself, and she and her friends are talking about sex and trying to figure out what all of that means. I saw that as a kind of a way of her like a child playing with manipulatives to try and figure out what it means for people to be together. And I also, I think, saw the claymation piece as that inner self. And so I think in some ways it would have been stronger if maybe that had just represented the inner self dying with the pills to make a commentary on that, and then the dragon to be a commentary on childhood. But yeah, that sounds good, Mark. I like what you said. So thank you for helping me think through that. As always, Mark, your brilliant skills of interpretation have helped me to gain some more understanding of this. So thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I'm glad my bumbling, stumbling theories can help in any way whatsoever.
That's why I said, well, this is what Mark said. It must be true.
Well, so listen, it's been a good show, but we do need to start turning our sights towards next week.
Next week?
What we've already told folks, but you want to remind folks of what we'll be doing next week?
Yeah, it's I'm excited because Mark, you and I, as we've mentioned already, we're both kind of still kids at heart who love comic book movies. And right now, nobody's doing it better than Marvel. And we've got Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and they're going like super small in this movie, right? They're going down to the quantum zone. It's going to be great. You looking forward to it?
I've already heard amazing things about it. I'm trying not to hear too much. I understand that it's an incredible launch to Phase 5 of the MC universe. I already have my tickets reserved. I'm that excited. I cannot wait to go see it.
Yes.
It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be fun.
I can't wait.
All right. Well, I hope that all of you can't wait either, and that you will join us next week for the Moonshine Jesus show, hopefully live now that we're back on Facebook. But whether you can or not, we're certainly glad that you are either watching us live here today or listening back on the podcast. We are grateful for you, and thank you for joining us here today on the Moonshine Jesus show.
Moonshine